I thought I was just helping carry groceries, but what she really wanted could change everything. The day began so simply that I didn't expect it to change anything. The air was warm, the kind of late afternoon heat that lingers gently in the neighborhood, and I was just about to head inside after a long day when I noticed her. She stood at the edge of her driveway, arms heavy with grocery bags that looked ready to slip from her grip. She caught my eye, and with a soft smile, half weary, half playful, she called out, "Would you mind helping me with these?" Her voice had a calm confidence, but there was also something vulnerable in it, like she didn't often ask for help. I walked toward her, trying not to look too eager, but my heart had already picked up its pace. She was a woman of presence, around 42, with long black hair that framed her lightly tanned face. The years had given her more than just beauty. There was depth in the way her eyes lingered, wisdom in the small laugh lines at the corners of her mouth. Her grace wasn't showy. It was quiet, magnetic, the kind you only noticed once you were close enough to feel it. I took the heavy bags from her arms, and for a moment our hands touched. It wasn't much, just skin against skin for a brief second, but I noticed the warmth. She noticed it too. Her gaze held mine for just a beat longer than polite, before she turned toward the front door and led the way. Inside her home, the air was cool, carrying the faint scent of fresh flowers and something sweet, maybe vanilla. Felt lived in, comfortable. As I set the groceries down on the kitchen counter, I stole a glance at her. She brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her fingers lingering there as if buying time before speaking. "Thank you," she said softly, almost in a way that made me wonder if the words were meant for more than just carrying bags. She leaned against the counter, her body language relaxed, yet her eyes, dark and steady, stayed fixed on me. I felt an odd mix of calm and electricity, like the room had become smaller, closer, and every movement carried meaning. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was heavy, but in a way that made me want to stay, to see what might fill it if neither of us rushed to break it. She reached into one of the bags and pulled out a carton of strawberries, her lips curving into a small smile as she offered me one. "Fresh, just picked this morning," she said. When our fingers brushed again as I took it, the warmth returned. Stronger this time. I realized then that this wasn't just about groceries, or strawberries, or politeness. She had invited me into her space, her rhythm, and maybe even her world. What she wanted might go beyond the simple weight of grocery bags. And deep inside, I wanted to know where this moment was leading. Her kitchen was bathed in afternoon light, the wide window over the sink spilling sunshine across the countertops. It gave the whole room a kind of glow, warm, ordinary, yet strangely intimate. I stood there, still catching my breath from carrying the heavy bags, but the weight of the moment felt heavier than anything I'd lifted. She moved gracefully, almost deliberately, unpacking items from the grocery bags. Each motion of her hands felt purposeful. Placing apples in a bowl, tucking milk into the fridge, sliding bread onto the counter. It wasn't what she did, but how she did it. Calm, unhurried, as if she was inviting me to notice her. "Would you mind handing me that jar?" she asked, nodding toward a glass container of pasta sauce. Her tone was light, casual, but when I stepped closer and passed it to her, our hands brushed again. Too many times now to be accident. I felt it linger, the spark, the small pause in her breathing, and I realized she wasn't pulling away. I studied her face as she looked down at the jar. Up close, I noticed the details that distance never allowed. The faint freckles near her cheekbones, the softness around her lips, the quiet maturity that only deepened her beauty. She looked up, caught me staring, and instead of breaking the gaze, she held it. "Thank you," she said again, this time slower. The way her voice dipped at the end made it sound less like gratitude and more like an opening. Something in me wanted to answer, not just with words, but with closeness. Yet I hesitated. She was older, poised, with a kind of confidence I hadn't fully grown into yet. I was 22, young, still figuring out who I was in the world. She, at 42, seemed like someone who had already fought her battles and learned how to carry herself with grace. But maybe that was exactly why she called me in. Not for muscles or convenience. For company. For presence. For something missing. I set the last bag on the counter, and without thinking, leaned against it, mirroring her posture. The space between us narrowed, not just physically, but emotionally. She noticed. Her lips curved into the faintest smile, like she was aware of the balance shifting. "You know," she said softly, picking up a strawberry from the carton and holding it between her fingers. "Sometimes the simplest things are sweeter when they're shared." Her eyes flicked to mine as she bit into it, the juice staining her lips a soft red. My chest tightened. She wasn't teasing, not exactly. It was subtler than that, an invitation wrapped in something as ordinary as fruit. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself, but I couldn't ignore it anymore. She wanted me there, not just as the boy next door who helped with bags, but as someone who could step closer. The question was, did I have the courage to? The kitchen grew quieter after we finished putting everything away, but the silence didn't feel empty. It was charged, almost humming with something unspoken. I could hear the faint ticking of the wall clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the soft rustle of her blouse when she moved. Ordinary sounds, yet each one seemed amplified, like the world wanted me to notice where I was and who I was with. She leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely, the light from the window catching the edge of her hair. Long, black strands fell gently over her shoulder, framing her face in a way that made her look effortlessly elegant. Her eyes softened when they met mine, but there was a weight there too, something she wasn't saying outright. "You've been working a lot lately, haven't you?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. I nodded, a little surprised she noticed. "Yeah. Classes, part-time shifts. Keeps me busy." "Busy can be good," she said, her voice steady, though quieter now. "But it can also be lonely." The word lingered between us, heavier than the grocery bags I had carried. Lonely. I could feel the truth of it in her tone, as if it wasn't about me at all, but about her. About the empty evenings, the long walks back into a quiet house, the meals cooked for one. I stepped closer without thinking, close enough that I could smell the faint scent of jasmine on her skin. My hands brushed the counter, only inches from hers. I didn't touch her. Not yet. But the closeness was enough to make my chest tighten. "Do you feel that way?" I asked softly. Her lips parted, as if she hadn't expected me to be so direct. For a moment, she didn't answer, her gaze flicking down to my hand resting on the counter, then back to my face. Finally, she nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Yes," she whispered, sometimes more than I like to admit. I wanted to reach for her then, to offer more than words. But I hesitated. The air was already so thick with tension that one wrong move could shatter it. Instead, I let the silence stretch, hoping she'd feel the truth in my presence. That I wasn't judging her, that I understood. Her shoulders relaxed just slightly, as if my quiet acceptance gave her permission to breathe. And then, almost casually, she unfolded her arms and rested her hand flat on the counter, only a breath away from mine. It wasn't a touch. Not exactly. But it was close enough that the warmth of her skin radiated toward me, pulling me in like a tide. Our eyes locked again, and I could see the flicker of something she was trying to keep hidden. Desire, longing, maybe even fear. She was older, wiser, careful. I was young, restless, uncertain. But in that moment, those differences blurred. There were only two people, standing close, both carrying a weight of loneliness heavier than either of us wanted to admit. And for the first time, I felt that maybe she didn't just want help with groceries. She wanted something more, something I was dangerously close to giving. The evening had settled in, turning the room a soft, golden hue as the last of the sunlight filtered through the partially drawn curtains. The kitchen felt different now, more intimate, more charged, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. She moved with effortless grace, setting the remaining groceries in their places, but every motion seemed deliberate, drawing attention to the subtle lines of her figure and the gentle sway of her long black hair. I lingered nearby, pretending to busy myself with wiping down the counters, Yet every glance I stole at her revealed layers of quiet vulnerability beneath her confident exterior. She caught my eye from across the room, and in that brief meeting of gazes, the air between us thickened. Her dark brown eyes, lined with subtle laugh lines and softened by experience, held an unspoken message. "You always seem so present," she said softly, almost as if testing the boundaries of our conversation. The words were casual, yet there was an underlying depth, an invitation to notice not just her, but the emotion simmering in the space we shared. I shifted slightly closer, pretending to reach for a dish, and our hands brushed lightly again. The touch was fleeting, yet the warmth lingered long after, leaving a fluttering awareness in my chest. She moved to the sink, pausing to rinse a few utensils, and I couldn't help but notice the subtle grace in the way she balanced herself. The soft curve of her shoulders, the gentle tilt of her head as she focused on the task. Everything about her radiated a quiet confidence, tempered by the vulnerability I sensed beneath the surface. Her presence was magnetic, but in a way that felt safe, inviting, and oddly comforting. As she spoke of the small routines of her day, her voice carried more than information. It carried emotion, a sense of longing I could feel more than hear. She spoke of quiet evenings, of meals eaten alone, of the little moments that went unnoticed. There was no overt declaration, no plea for attention. Yet each sentence was weighted with desire for connection, for someone to see beyond the surface. I realized then that her need went far deeper than simply sharing groceries. I handed her a clean dish towel, and for a moment, our fingers lingered as the towel passed from my hand to hers. That fleeting contact sent an electric awareness coursing through me, as though the entire room had shrunk to the span of our touch. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers closed slightly around mine, just enough to acknowledge the shared warmth without speaking it aloud. The intensity of the unspoken words filled the room. Every glance, every brush of her hand, every soft sigh was layered with meaning, desire restrained by caution, longing tempered by the weight of experience. She wanted more than casual conversation. She wanted connection, closeness, someone who would meet her unspoken needs without forcing them into words. And I, despite my own hesitations, felt pulled toward her. Not just to respond, but to step into that quiet space between desire and restraint, to bridge the invisible distance she had so carefully crafted. The realization settled in me with a slow, steady certainty. Helping her carry groceries had been just the beginning. What she truly wanted was something neither of us had dared to name. Yet, the living room felt different now. Calm, quiet, yet vibrating with the kind of tension that only builds in shared silences. The soft hum of the ceiling fan and the distant sounds of traffic outside were the only interruptions, yet they seemed almost to accentuate the closeness between us. I could feel the warmth radiating from her presence, subtle but undeniable, and the way she moved made the space feel smaller, more intimate. She sat on the edge of the sofa, her posture relaxed yet deliberate, the gentle curve of her back and the tilt of her head making her seem simultaneously confident and vulnerable. Her long black hair fell over one shoulder, catching the warm indoor light and brushing softly against the edge of her sweater. I remained standing, awkwardly shifting my weight from one foot to the other, aware of the almost imperceptible gap that separated us. "You've been quiet," she said softly, her voice almost teasing, yet carrying an undercurrent of curiosity. The dark brown of her eyes met mine with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. She wasn't asking for conversation. She was testing the boundaries of what we both felt but hadn't yet spoken. I took a careful step closer, my hand brushing against the arm of the sofa near hers, the warmth of her skin almost tangible through the fabric. She shifted slightly toward me, though not fully inviting contact, just enough that the proximity felt charged. The simple act of being near her was heavy with implication, as if the air between us had grown thicker with every heartbeat. She leaned back, and for a moment our eyes locked in silence. There was an unspoken question there, a delicate curiosity, a pull that neither of us dared to articulate aloud. The slight rise and fall of her chest, the subtle trembling in her fingers as she adjusted her sleeve, drew my attention completely. It wasn't just attraction, it was something deeper, something rooted in trust, in longing, in a need for connection that neither of us could ignore. I sat down on the sofa beside her, careful to leave a respectful distance, yet close enough to feel the warmth of her presence. The subtle brush of our arms was enough to send a shiver through me, a quiet acknowledgement that the boundaries were beginning to blur. She looked at me, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her lips, and the vulnerability in her expression was beautiful, almost mesmerizing. Her hand hovered just inches from mine, and I could see the hesitation, the weight of what she wanted but couldn't voice outright. I didn't reach immediately. Instead, I let her decide, giving her the space to make the first small movement. When her fingers finally brushed mine, it was electric, tender, deliberate, an acknowledgement of the connection building between us. In that suspended moment, it became impossible to ignore the truth. The simple errand of carrying groceries had evolved into something charged with desire, curiosity, and a quiet, growing intimacy. The walls of the house seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of us, caught in a current neither of us had expected but both secretly wanted to explore. She wanted more than just company. She wanted me, and in that room it was clear that she was ready to let me see it. The room was quiet now, the soft hum of the ceiling fan and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards the only sounds breaking the stillness. The golden glow of the table lamp bathed the living room in warmth, washing over the soft cream-colored sofa and the tidy bookshelves lining the walls. Everything seemed suspended in that quiet intimacy, as if time had slowed, letting the tension between us stretch longer than it had any right to. I sat close to her on the sofa, careful to respect the invisible line between curiosity and boldness. Her long black hair fell over one shoulder, glinting slightly in the warm light, framing her face in a way that made her look effortlessly graceful. Her lightly tanned skin caught the glow, highlighting the subtle laugh lines around her dark brown eyes and the delicate curve of her lips. She was beautiful not in a flashy, attention-grabbing way, but in a quiet, confident, and undeniably mature way that made it impossible to look away. Her hand hovered just above mine, a breath away from contact. The tension was almost unbearable, yet there was an invitation in that hesitation, a silent question that neither of us dared to voice. I felt my heart pound in my chest, aware of every tiny shift in her posture, every flicker of her gaze. Each movement was deliberate but soft, a slow dance of emotions neither of us had yet named. "You're different," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence without disturbing it. There was no judgment, only curiosity and a hint of vulnerability she rarely allowed anyone to see. Her eyes searched mine, steady and unflinching, as if she wanted to read not just my words but the truth behind them. I moved slightly closer, careful, tentative, giving space but closing just enough so that the warmth radiating from her body brushed against me. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned a fraction closer, her head tilting slightly, letting a strand of hair fall behind her ear. The proximity was intoxicating. I could feel the subtle rise and fall of her chest with each breath, the warmth of her presence like sunlight in a quiet room. Her fingers finally grazed mine, a touch so light it could have been accidental, but the electricity it sent through me was anything but. I held my hand still, letting her make the first real move, aware that in this small, simple gesture lay more meaning than words could convey. Her dark eyes met mine, and I could see every thought, every hesitation, every unspoken desire reflected there. The moment stretched, delicate and fragile, the world outside forgotten. There was longing, yes, but also trust, curiosity, and the quiet acknowledgement that something profound had begun. She wanted me, not just to help, not just to be there, but to truly see her, to share something that had been waiting for the right person to notice. And then, just as our hands finally intertwined, the screen could fade, leaving the audience with the heart-stopping question. What happens next? The pull, the tension, the promise of connection remain unresolved, urging viewers to uncover the full story. The room held its breath. The story paused on the precipice of desire and discovery, inviting the viewer to take the next step into the full narrative. Backhand index pointing right, curious about what happens next. Watch the full story to see how this unexpected connection unfolds. Link in the description. Don't miss a single moment of this slow burn romance.